David Brewster here with another 3 for All, and this is 3 Trevor Rabin Licks from 1991. And Trevor Rabin is a very exciting and successful, musician, guitarist, songwriter, vocalist. And most people out there know him from joining the group Yes, like in the early 80s. And he joined forces with those guys, and they came out with 90125, which just exploded. That's Yes's, most successful selling album. Owner of a Lonely Heart, and Leave It, and Changes, and all those songs. That's a great album. And I know for, Steve Howe fans and kind of Yes purists, they don't really like, the 80s and 90s Yes as much as they like the 70s Yes. I love Yes. I love Steve Howe. I even wrote a whole lesson as a tribute to him for Guitar Player magazine. I guess that was technically a couple of years ago. But, I'm definitely a huge fan. But I'm also a big fan of Trevor Rabin, and I know that's kind of sacrilege or, grounds to start fighting with somebody. But I like both eras. I love the classic, 70s Yes with Steve Howe, Rick Wakeman, Bill Bruford and the gang. But I also like the 80s, Tony Kaye and Alan White and Trevor Rabin. Just shared that image, and most people know Trevor from playing with Yes or as a solo artist or maybe collaborating with other bands or artists. But one huge area on his resume is with film, scoring and soundtrack for films. And that includes, huge Hollywood big budget movies, Armageddon and all these different movies. He's done a lot of work with Jerry Bruckheimer, and it's just exciting to really notice somebody. And I definitely remember like in the late 90s, early 2000s, when I would watch a movie, the credits would kind of roll in the beginning and they would list Trevor Rabin's name. And anytime I'd see it, I'd think, oh, hey, I like this movie before it even started. Trevor did the music. And it was exciting, to hear the production and the film scoring. And sometimes he was playing guitar. Sometimes he was literally, writing orchestral or symphonic music and keyboards and all these different things. So he's extremely talented. He's very prolific. He's been on the scene for a very long time. And, it's just a very exciting guitarist to kind of follow and notice and listen to, where it's like, wow, he's just loaded with all these great ideas. The licks from this lesson come from a live solo he did in 91, and this would have been around the Union album. And I actually saw them on that tour. That would have been like July of 1991. I saw him at Deer Creek in Indianapolis, and I had horrible seats. I was way out in the lawn, and I do remember the show. I felt like I had to go. I was like, okay. And I remember I went with a friend and I just wanted to experience it. I was like, and I knew even at that time, I was like, I don't think they're ever going to really do this again. And they're all going to be there. Steve Howe and Trevor, and Bill and Alan and all of them. Tony Kaye, Rick Wakeman, they're all there. First lick from the solo is this exotic kind of scale phrase, and this is based around A Phrygian dominant. And Phrygian dominant would be the fifth mode from harmonic minor. And so in position, kind of loosely in the same position, A Phrygian dominant would look and sound like this. Very distinct, very exotic flavor. And the lick from the solo looks like this. Let me go through that a little bit slower. So it starts on the B string, and he's really just targeting that E note. And then he's going to ascend E, F to G, or 17, 18 to 20. And then he comes back down that F to E, and then G, F, and then D to that C sharp. Something like that. And then he does this run. So one more time there. Something like this. And when Trevor played it, it sounded like this. The next example is very unusual. This kind of reminds me of something you'd hear from somebody like Buckethead, but here's Trevor, jamming this with Yes, back in 91. And it uses some really interesting tonalities, and it's just kind of sidestepping up the fretboard. And during the solo, the band kind of like stopped, and it's just Alan and Trevor. Alan's playing drums, Trevor's playing guitar, and they're playing off each other. And Alan's just doing this crazy, drum fill or whatever. And then Trevor starts kind of moving up the fretboard like this. Very bizarre. If you're looking for something to kind of freak your neighbors out or haunt them in the middle of the night, there's your riff right there. That's something you can really annoy your neighbors with. But really what's happening there, it's an F sharp 7, and then we're going to a G major 7 flat 5, which is very unusual, especially followed by that F sharp 7. And then we're just going to basically repeat that all the way up the neck. So now G sharp 7. A major 7 flat 5, A sharp 7, B major 7 flat 5, C7, C sharp major 7 flat 5, D7, E flat major 7 flat 5, E7, F major 7 flat 5, and then back to that F sharp 7 again, and then lo and behold we're back on the G major 7 flat 5 again. So we just kind of wrapped it up an octave higher than where we started. So it's very unusual. But I've also kind of found a way to use all of my fret hand fingers and kind of turn that, once again, almost like an exercise. It's a really good kind of picking workout too. And I just like that riff because it's really different. It's strange, but I like it. Very unusual too, which I'm a big fan of weird, unusual ideas. The next idea is this fast kind of pentatonic based run, and it's during that part of the solo where it's Alan and Trevor playing, and Alan's still going crazy on the drums, and then Trevor kind of links up and starts playing this. And it's really just out of A minor pentatonic right there. And there's a couple different ways you can play that. Of course, you could do it that way, right out of the box. And I think that's how Trevor played it during the solo, because you can't really see his hand from this angle. You're kind of seeing it from the side, and it looks like his hand is way up on the fretboard. You can kind of see his thumb and his hand by the neck joint right there. So he's really just kind of descending out of the box. But there are some, kind of variations you can make of that lick. So we could do this. You could also do it this way. And it's 3 notes on the B and then 2 notes on the G. And that's a little bit smoother, I think, fingering-wise. But then there's another way you can play it right here on the high E string. Same notes. It's kind of harder to shift up and get that big bend up there at the 20th fret. But I like doing that, learning a phrase the way it was played and then kind of varying it and making some mutations of it. So there's 3 different flavors of the same thing. This. Really interesting. It's a bonus lick, and this didn't come from the solo from 1991. This actually came from a solo from 1985. So this would have been part of the extended 90125 tour. And during that tour, Trevor started playing a solo that's called Solly's Beard. And the first time I ever heard Solly's Beard, I fell in love with it. I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. It's all acoustic. And it's kind of a hybrid between John McLaughlin and Al Di Meola, and then just a bunch of Trevor's ideas too. But it does have a very distinct Di Meola, McLaughlin kind of influence. You can hear it. It's like, okay. but then it's kind of his own thing too. He's done a lot more. He's not just copying Alan and John. He's kind of, used that, I think, as inspiration, but then found his own kind of piece and melodic idea. But this is an accelerando section from this solo. And accelerando, in case you're not familiar with what that means, it basically means gradually played faster, or accelerate gradually. And it's a really challenging thing, and it kind of reminds me of something that Paul Gilbert has talked about in the past, and that's picking dynamics. Practicing picking really hard, and then practicing without stopping, trying to ease up and soften, and then start picking louder and harder, and then lighter and softer, and basically working on picking dynamics, which that's really challenging. And so it's similar to that, but what we're going to do is we're going to start really slow, and then almost like you're in a car or a motorcycle or whatever, you're going to slowly start going faster and faster and faster. So the phrase looks like this. And then you do it again. It's kind of like a B Phrygian kind of thing. But the key there is starting very slowly, and then you're going to push yourself to go a little bit faster and a little bit faster. And I guess the goal or the idea that you want to kind of tap into is make it very gradual. Like, you don't want to go from really slow to really fast immediately. Try to make that in-between area from slow to fast last as long as possible. And for most players out there, you're going to start slow, and then once you start getting a little bit faster, you're just going to start shredding. But try to resist that temptation of going full on, full speed, for as long as you can. And it's challenging. And you can use more distortion if you want. That's a very challenging, lick, and especially he's playing on acoustic guitar, which is insanity. But that's part of that Demiola McLaughlin kind of influence, I think. I think he wanted that sound instead of an electric sound. But interesting idea, something you can practice. You can practice that lick, but you can make variations, and you could practice almost any lick that way. Go really slow, and then almost like I said, like you're in a car or a boat or whatever, just start going faster and faster. And then you can try going as fast as possible, and then go in reverse, and then slow down. And that's really hard, to go full speed, and then slowly revert back to a crawl or a very slow speed. That's hard. That's going to wrap this look at 3 licks from Trevor Rabin from 1991. And obviously, once again, I'm a big fan. I've been following Trevor's music since I was in high school, and I've always found him very interesting and exciting. Great songwriter and producer and guitarist and vocalist, and I mean, he has a hefty resume of all these accomplishments and appearances and compilations and collaborations. And I really dig musicians like that, where it's like, wow, he can do all sorts of different things. And, his work with Yes is very impressive. I'm a huge fan of the albums he appeared on. And I'm a huge fan of the albums he didn't appear on, all the classic stuff from the 70s too. But there's something about, 90125, Big Generator, Union. He had a solo album, Can't Look Back, or Can't Look Away. Yeah, Can't Look Away. His solo album's brilliant. I think that's from like the early 90s, 90, 91, somewhere around there. Can't Look Away is great. It's kind of a forgotten, Trevor Rabin artifact or album. And then a lot of his music, from the early days. He's from South Africa, and he kind of became known from his solo albums early on. The album Wolf, there's some, some interesting music of his before Yes. But anyway, I can blab about Trevor all day long. So leave some feedback and some comments. Please subscribe to Late Night Lessons, and I'll be back before you know it with more content material. Thank you.